welcome to episode 4 of our 1/12 scale coastal homewares shop project. Today I'd really like to get the exterior completed. I also want to make a plan for the ground floor of the shop for when we begin on the inside, which I'm really looking forward to. Okay, so there's lots to do, so let's get started. So I just want to start by showing you the roof tile paper that I ordered, and I ordered 3 sheets of this, but I don't think now that's going to be enough. Although it did obviously give the sizes, I thought that this one sheet would sort of go over the front and then wrap around the back as well, but it doesn't quite fit. So I'm probably going to need to order a couple more sheets. And as we did with the brick paper here, I want to cut it sort of along the joins in the tiles there and join it together like that to try and create that invisible join again. But I really like the colour of this and how it looks overall. I think the bluey grey really picks out the colour of the paint that we've used for the front of the shop there. So really pleased with that. And again, like the brick paper, this is embossed. So if I turn that over and show you on the back there, you can see a bit more clearly where the embossed lines are between the tiles there. I also want to show you the chimney pots. So I ordered a pair of each of these, and I've got a round one, there like that, put that down there, and a square one. They're like that, and I'm not sure why, but I think I prefer the square. I think it sort of really suits the style of the building a bit more. I don't know, it just seems more in keeping with the style of the shop. So I'm going to go for the square. Let me put the round one on there as well. I like that the square ones are a little bit bigger as well, and they just fit perfectly on there. So I hope you agree with me on that. And I want to age these up as well before I fit them, and I will be using charcoal for that, but we'll get around to that at a later stage. I think that's going to look really nice. Something else I just wanted to show you before we get started is this little LED lantern, and again I just ordered one of these to see what it was like, and I'm really delighted with it. I think it's really lovely, and the battery sits there in the bottom. You can just see the battery there, and this, you just screw up this little disc sort of at the bottom there, and then you've got the little switch on the back. Isn't that wonderful? I was really pleased with that, and I think these LED lamps and things are a really good option to electrify a doll's house, because if you're not sure where you want your lamps to be placed, then you can just use these, and then you can just pinpoint the light where you need it. And once we've got all the furniture in, we can sort of add this where we need to highlight things, and of course they can be moved around. So if sort of when your front door's shut you wanted to show more light coming from a window, you can just stand that behind the window and do it like that when you sort of dress your doll's house to show. So really pleased with that, and of course I can order these in because these are from Streets Ahead and I have a trade account with them. So if you like the look of these, just drop me a line and I can let you have a price. And the code number is DE368, and they take these little lithium batteries, and the battery is a 3-volt CR1632. But I can order these, so if you'd like to buy them through my Etsy shop, we can do it that way. So that was that, and then I've also got the wiring system in, and this takes 12 bulbs, so we'll be able to get all of the lights that we need, and a few more if we decide on it when we start electrifying the shop. I've got the transformer already, but the only thing I haven't got is the little plugs, and they were out of stock at Streets Ahead last time I ordered. But because I really want to get on with that for the next episode, I'll probably order those from Amazon. I've seen some on there. I just need to double check the ones that I need. We'll get round to that hopefully in the next episode, because obviously we need to decide where we're going to have the wires before we put the flooring in. So that's something we'll need to think about. Okay. Oh, left the little lantern on. So just one little job I just got out of the way. If you remember where we wrapped the brick paper around the sides, we had a little blank area here, and I was going to paint it blue, but it actually looked nicer with a strip of brick on there. And again, I think that's blended in quite nicely. So I've done that at both ends. So with this inside of the door, I just actually want to add some lining paper and then paint it cream. So I'm going to use that sort of patchwork scrap paper method again to create a template for this whole back part. And I want to get that done before I start fitting the acetate and the remaining frames. And then whilst the paint's drying, I can start fitting the acetate and then cutting the wood to make the little frame at the back to hold the acetate into place. And then I'm going to dry fit the doors again because they both feel really tight in there now, and they've obviously expanded where they've been sitting, so I'll have to sand a little bit off of both of those. And then once I'm happy with the fit, we can fit the door furniture and get those in. Okay, so I'll start creating that template. So I've made a template for the inside of the front door, again just using that patchwork system, and it's gone a little bit curly because I made this a few days ago and I just sort of propped it inside the door of the shop. I'm going to transfer this onto lining paper. Now, lining paper is sort of like a thick, almost like a blotting paper, and it can be used on walls just to paint over, or it can actually be used under wallpaper just to give a nicer finish. Now, I think here in the UK this is quite well known, but I do get a lot of questions from people in the US asking what lining paper actually is. Now, I'm sure it's something you have, but maybe it's called something different. So if any of my patrons from the US could maybe help out with that. Is this something you have, and what do you actually call it there? And if you've seen any of my Doll's House Diary, you'll see that I've used this before I used it for the kitchen, where I just want to paint the walls and I don't want to use a paper. I'll just use this to give a nicer finish. And that's what I'm going to be doing here. And then I'm actually just going to use a really neutral colour for the inside of the door. And then if I want to change that at a later date, I can just paint over it. But probably I'll just leave it in a neutral colour. And if you're one of those people that like decorating on the inside of the door, the main door that opens, then maybe we could put a few pictures on there. We'll have window displays anyway in that door to make it a little bit more interesting. But just for now, I want to get the lining paper cut. We've got a few bits to do before I can fit it and then apply that coat of paint. So the cutting mat is just slightly larger than the door, so that's worked out quite nicely. But if you're doing it this way, do make sure that you've protected your surface underneath if you haven't got a large enough cutting mat. And as we did with the brick paper, I'm just going to use masking tape to secure it to the lining paper, but I'm only going to use the tape in the areas that are going to be cut away, because this paper is really easily damaged. So if you were to get some masking tape on it and pull it off, it will just sort of scuff the paper. It just goes all sort of fluffy. So I'll start by sort of attaching it down the sides. And this will straighten it out at the same time. And then those side cuts will be the last cut that I make. Just making sure there that it's all sort of laying flat. Don't want to cut it and then find that I've cut it with a big roll in the middle. So that's now secured nice and flat to the lining paper, so I can start cutting it out. And I'm just going to use my Swan Morton craft knife, and I've got my steel rule here as well to go along the lines. And I'm going to start with the windows. Just take your time and be really careful when you get into the corners so that you don't actually cut over into the paper that we want to keep. And that piece can go. So that's the windows and doors cut out, and now I'm going to cut out the whole of the template. So just make sure I'm still on the cutting mat there, and I'm just on it over this side. Just go down that other side first, and then I'll go along the bottom. So I've just turned that around so I can get at it a bit more easily. Oops. And off the side of the cutting mat there. A little bit still attached there. And there we are. So I just want to carefully separate these now. There's probably just a little bit of tape holding them together along the edges. So just be really careful when you're pulling that up. And there are a few other bits I want to do before attaching this, because I want to get the doors fitted. So I'm going to very carefully take this and put it in the dining room for now. I'm going to discard this piece because I'm not going to be needing that again, but if you were doing a room of your doll's house and you've got sort of symmetrical similar rooms, then it's worth keeping hold of it, because then you just need to make the one template, and it might just be that you've got to turn that the other way around and you can use it for other rooms. But I'm going to get rid of this piece. I'm going to put that in the recycling. So I'm going to start with the shop door, and if I just slot that in there, it's a little bit tight in that top right hand corner. Hear that squeak there? That's because it's just really tight in there. And also in that bottom corner down there. So I'll move this door out of the way, and then I'm just going to do a little bit of sanding in each of those corners, and then we'll try it again. So I've got a 180 grit sandpaper here, and I just want to do a few sweeps at each of those corners. So keep the piece upright and just go along in the one direction, like that, and it does start to remove the paint, but once that's in place, that's not going to be seen, so don't worry about that. And then that top corner as well. So again, support the door on the frame. Okay, let's bring this door back in. So that's certainly a little bit easier down there in that bottom corner. So I'm happy with that now. I just need to take a little bit more off that top one. You can hear it still sort of squeaking there. So I'll do a few more sweeps. So that's now a really nice fit. There's still a little bit of tightness in there, but as I've said to you before, I'd rather have that than have too much gap in. So I have got a little bit of gap in along the top and bottom, but you will see that indoors. No door is going to sort of be a really tight fit in an opening. And I've tested it and it does push inwards. So I'm really happy with that now. That was quite a bit of back and forth in, and I went all the way along the top edge there and a little bit further down the side as well. And I know that seems really sort of time consuming, just doing that little bit at a time, but I would urge you to do it, because otherwise you'll just end up taking too much off and then you'll be unhappy with the fit. So what I want to do now is get this glazed and get the door furniture on. So I've just stopped for my mid-morning cuppa, and I thought it was a good time to show you my list. Now I made this just after I got in bed last night actually, because I knew I was going to be filming today. And if I don't have a list to work to, I just end up waking up in the middle of the night and thinking about what I've got to do and what order it needs doing in. Now you probably can't read these, but I just wanted to stress the importance really of making lists so that you can try and work in a particular order and do things in the correct order. It can be really frustrating if you've done something and then you go to do the next thing and realise that you should have done that first, especially if you then have to undo the work that you've already done. So I just like to make a list and I write everything on it, trying to sort of put it into order. And then as you work your way down, you'll find that you go to write something and then you'll automatically think, no, that should have been done earlier on, as I'd done there with a couple of things. And it really just helps sort of have some structure to your time as well. And another good thing about lists is that when you tick something off, it does actually release dopamine into your system. You do actually get a natural high from ticking something off your list. So I think that's another good reason for doing it. So I've got several sort of points on here really relating to the outside of the shop and what I want to get done in this episode. So we'll try and get through it all. So I'll finish my cup of tea now and then we'll attach the acetate to the shop door. The sun is quite bright now on the desk, so I've had to put the blind down, so I hope it's not too gloomy on camera. So we're now going to fit the acetate to the shop door, and I just want to show you a little trick for when you need to fit a piece of acetate into an exact space. So measure the area that you need to fill and cut a piece of paper that fits. And you can try the piece of paper in, and if you need to trim anything off, then you can do that. So for the glazing, I'm using this 0.5mm acetate, and this is sold in A4 sheets, and I do actually sell this in my Etsy shop, and I've got about, I think, 4 or 5 sheets for all of the glazing in the shop. So we'll see how much you would actually need to do all of the windows and the door. So take your template and lay it along a straight edge of the acetate like that. And again, I'm actually going to use masking tape to stick that into place. And I've just got it on this blue sheet here, just so that I don't pick up too much dust from my cutting mat. So I'm just straighten that up again. Stick it down. I'll just put a little piece along that bottom edge as well. Like that. And then you can just cut that out just using normal scissors. Oops, come at it the other way. It's not difficult to cut. Like that. And there you have a piece of acetate that fits perfectly. I started laughing then because I thought, what if it didn't actually fit after all of that? And I'm already thinking about having the little open and closed sign on the inside of this acetate, and I can't wait to start making all of the accessories and miniatures for this shop. There's so many nice pieces that we'll be able to include. Okay, so I'm now going to glue that into place. So I'm just going to go and grab my glue and glaze. So this is called Glue and Glaze by Deluxe Materials, and I'm a real fan of this because you can use it for acetate and it doesn't fog the acetate or leave any marks on it. Now I also sell this in my Etsy shop, and I don't mean to keep sort of pushing the shop at you, but I'm just telling you because I know sometimes it can be difficult to get hold of things, and I want to try and have everything that I use available for you in the shop if you can't sort of find it locally. So that's the only reason I keep saying it. So this comes with a lovely little applicator tip, but I broke off the top of my bottle. I can't even remember how I did it now, being too heavy-handed probably. So I'm going to use a cocktail stick as I normally do. So I've just put a little bit on the card there, and even that little bit there is probably going to be too much. This really does go a long way. It's nice fine glue, and you really do only need a little bit. So I'm just going to spread that around on the inside of that lip there. See that little tiny sort of drop that I just put in there? I've spread that all the way along that top lip. And that really is all you need. And Deluxe Materials, I don't know if you've heard of them or not, you probably have, but they do some really, really great products. You know, you can get all the sort of scenic water from them, the rust kit, and I can get a few of the bits from Streets Ahead. They don't do the whole range. I did speak to Deluxe Materials about opening up an account, but it's one of those places where you need to, you know, there's quite a high minimum order value for trade people, which I couldn't actually stretch to. But they do some really great stuff. So I've just spread that nice and thinly all the way around the lip there. Lay that down, and then I normally just run the acetate through my fingers just to get rid of any dust, but if you find you've sort of put it down in the wrong place and got a lot of dust, you can just use a piece of kitchen towel, damp kitchen towel, to wipe that off. And then I'm just going to slot it into place. So slot it in, give it a press down, and you'll see the glue start to spread around there. And don't worry if it sort of goes over the lip and onto the front edge, because once it starts to dry and becomes tacky, you can just remove it with a cocktail stick. But if you just use a small amount, as I've done there, you'll see that you can hardly see any at all from the front edge of the door. So I'm just pressing that down all the way around. And I'm not sure what the drying time is on that. Let me just, oh look at the writing, it's tiny. Let me just see if I can quickly find a drying time. Yeah, bonds wood, plastic, metal, painted surfaces. No, it just says hold in place for 15 minutes until dry. I don't want to do that, but I'll put it to one side. Maybe I'll try and weigh that down with something. Let me just get a piece of kitchen towel. So put that on there, and I'll just go and get a couple of those little sample paint pots, and I'll just stand those on there. Just grab the first two I find. Just stand those on there, and that will then just hold that into place. So hold it into place or put it to one side for 15 minutes, and that's fine because we can now start dry fitting the street door. So that's the street door in place, and again that feels really tight around those top edges. See, it's really quite difficult even to push it open there. It feels a little bit tight along the bottom as well. That bottom corner down there. But I'll start with that top sort of corner, and we'll see how it goes, because I think that corner's just a little bit tight because there's a little bit of paint just sitting on the inside edge there, so I may just need to chip that sort of little lump away and then just touch over that with a little bit of paint. So I've been back and forth a few times, and I'm quite happy with that now. There's still a little bit of tightness at the top, but as I said with the shop door, I'd rather that than there be too much gapping. And of course when the pins are there and holding it straight, that should just open and close nicely. It's just because I'm not keeping it in the same place as I'm sort of opening and closing. But you can see that's a much better fit there. So happy with that, I'm now going to go ahead and fit the door furniture. I just want to show you what I've got for this door. So I've got this really nice little antique brass door knocker, which I want to put up there. And then I've got two of these false letterboxes. So these are the non-opening, just the sort of letterbox plates. And these are in a bright gold, so ignore that because I'll be using that metal painting technique to cover those. And that will go there. And then I've also got a second one of those, which I'll put on the inside. And again, they're fixed. I would rather have got an opening one, but I couldn't find one. But these have got some quite nice detail on them, a little bit of punched detail around the outside there. So I think painted antique brass, they'll look quite nice. And then I've got a couple of door knockers here. And this is the one I was going to use, and I've already painted that using the Humbrol metallic paint. I can't remember what the colour was that I used now, but I can look that up. So I was going to use that one. It's difficult to show you because it obviously doesn't sit there, but it's, as you can see, it's quite large. That's probably got about a 6mm or 5mm diameter on that. But I have got this one, which is probably about a 4mm diameter, or even 3.5. And I'm not sure. Again, it's one of those times I wish you could hear me, or I wish I could hear you answering me. I'm not sure whether to go for the smaller one. I'm just trying to hold it with tweezers, see if that helps. Oh, I've got the wrong tweezers there as well. Pointed ones, let's try those. Get hold of that stem there. So that's the smaller one. Actually really liking how that looks so far, even with that bright gold letterbox. And then the larger one. And I'm never really a fan of too large hardware. So I think that looks okay. It's quite a nice brass knob, but I think because the door knocker is just so nice and properly to scale, I think that might look a bit big. Yeah, it does. It does look too big. I just sort of glanced from the side there and it looks huge. So I think I'll use the smaller one. Yeah, I prefer that. I know you can get really big door knockers, but I think that looks quite nice. Again, hope you agree with me on that. So I want to get that letterbox painted first, and then we can get this fitted. I do like how that looks. I think the antique brass against that blue is a really lovely combination, isn't it? I just realised I was showing you the letterbox the wrong way round. That's the front, so that the letterbox sort of indents, and I was showing you that side. And I was wondering why it had a bit of scuffing on it. I was thinking to myself, I must stick that on the inside, but obviously that's the front of it there. And that is actually a lot nicer, isn't it? So I've just put some masking tape here onto a piece of card, sticky side up, and I'm just going to put those on like that, about halfway. And I've just used a tiny little bit of fine wire wool on each of those as well. That just roughs up the surface enough so that my paint will stick, but without marking the surface. So I've got my metallic brass here and a little bit of matte black, which will help turn it into more of an antique brass colour. And then I just dip the brush into some thinners, or you can use white spirit, and that just helps them to mix. But I'm only going to take a little tiny bit of the black. I don't want it to go too dark. Hasn't made much of a difference. I'll put a bit more in. And I did a video on YouTube of how to customise your hardware using this method, and I've posted that here on my Patreon channel as well, so it's not sort of part of your monthly subscription, it's just anybody can watch it, but I just thought it's easier for you to find if I put it here as well. If you look at your sort of original piece and use that as a bit of a colour match. Actually, just looking through the camera lens there, this looks really dark, but it's not. It is actually going a nice sort of antique brass colour. In fact, I quite like that. I don't think I'll add any more of the black in. Right, so let me put that on the letterboxes, and then you should be able to see what that looks like. I'll just get that little door knocker out of the way. Actually, I don't want to splash paint on it. Oh, that's nice. And these are metal, but they're just that really thin sheet brass. So get a nice sort of thin, even coverage on. And then we can do a second coat. Not leaving it to dry completely, because I think that will need to be left overnight, but just maybe after half an hour or so. But already you can see that's really toning down that bright gold colour. So that's just one thin coat there. Looks a little bit streaky, but once that's dried off, not completely, because that takes quite a few hours, but I'll probably leave it half an hour to an hour, and then I'll mix a little bit more paint up and apply a second coat, and then that should do it. And you can see that's already a much better colour match. So do have a look at that little video on using these metallic paints, because it's a really nice idea if you want to match hardware or door furniture. So the acetate has now dried into place on the shop door, and look, from behind you can't see any glue residue at all. That's completely dried in. And I now want to cut a little bit of beading just to go around the inside of the door there. So I'm using this 1.5mm strip, and I'm just going to really carefully lay it into place on there, and then use my craft knife to make a little score like that, and then cut it away from the piece. Can't see the score now, I've moved it away. Make it a little bit deeper. Be careful not to cut into your door. Piece. And then I've got some masking tape there ready to put that on. I'm going to paint that and then attach it. And I'm measuring both sides. I always like to measure both sides rather than just going by the first piece, because you never know, it might be slightly different. Oops. Actually, just remembered I'm going to have to lay those into place to cut the vertical pieces. Just pop that in there. Lots of aeroplanes and helicopters going past today. Not sure what's going on. That's the end of that strip's just a little bit splinter. That end's better. This 1.5 fits perfectly in there. Just fits inside that little lip as well. If you don't have 1.5 strip, you can just cut it from your sheet wood. And I actually find this strip to sometimes be up to 2mm wide. And there is always a tolerance on sheet wooden strips. So this is sometimes sort of 2 by 1.5, but for using it for mouldings and things like that, that's really not going to matter. It actually works quite nicely on this door. So pop those on there. Clean the dust off the door. I'm going to put that carefully to one side. and then I'll get some paint on these, and that won't take long to dry, and then we can get that beading fitted. So that's the first coat of paint drying on the beading for the shop door, and it didn't give a very nice coat, so I'm going to have to do a second coat on those, but that's okay, that won't take a minute. And then whilst that's drying, I've just been cutting the beading for the inside of the windows. So once we've got our acetate in place, this will then form a sort of mirrored frame at the back. And when you're doing the back beading, any little gaps will be forgiven because you've got the sort of dark blue border. So once this is painted, you're not going to see any tiny little gaps like that. And I'm sure I've got quite a few in mine. But I think that looks quite nice. And then I've also done the beading for the windows at the top of the doors. It's hiding in there. It doesn't hold into place because this is actually the beading for the front of the door. If you remember, I didn't do it at the time because I need to get the pin, the top pin, into that bit of panelling, so I wouldn't have been able to attach the beading, but I've got it cut now for when we're ready for it. And then once we've fitted the acetate at the top of the doors, then I can do another little bit of beading just to fit around the inside there. And I've just stuck some strips of masking tape to my card so that I can then lay these pieces on more or less in order, so that I know where they all go back. And that can give all, and then I can give those all a coat of paint as well. So my beading strip for the shop door has dried, but I've just turned it over and I'm going to do a coat on the back. I did try to work my brush underneath just to get a line along each side of each piece, but when I've just tried a piece in place, you can actually see some of this natural wood showing through the window at the front. So I'm just going to give them one coat on the back, and then we can fit that. And I also did one coat on all of the other beading. Where's that? Couldn't remember where I'd put it then. I've just put that in the window. So that first coat is drying. And I did a second coat on the letterboxes. And I think they look really good now. So we've got lots of bits ready now to be carried on with. But the next thing I want to do is get this shop door complete and fitted. So to fit the beading, I'm going to be using the glue and glaze again. So I've got my tweezers here, which makes it easier to apply the glue and to actually attach the beading. Got a bit of glue on my card again. So again, you only really need a small amount. And pop that into place. So I haven't got any glue sort of seeping out of the join there, but if any is to on these other pieces, I'll just actually leave it until it begins to dry a little bit, and then I can remove it as normal with a cocktail stick. But because you don't need a lot of glue at all, it tends not to sort of seep out like it does when we're building furniture. You could probably get away without doing beading if you wanted to, because it looks quite nice inside that sort of lip area. And because you can't see the glue, that helps. But I just think it finishes it off, makes it look a little bit more finished. But it's entirely up to you. Just checking again whether I've got a nicer side on there. Oops. But see how little of that glue you need, and I've still got far too much left on my card there. I do try and tip that back into the bottle if I can. And I haven't been sort of measuring these pieces before fitting them, and I've been lucky up until now. Mind you, having said that, it's just a little bit tight, which I don't mind. Maybe sort of dry fit them before you put the glue on. Just got a little bit of glue in that corner actually. A clean cocktail stick there. So I'll weigh that down again and just leave that to dry for the 15 minutes that they say, and then we can get the door handle on. So it's the next day now and I'm ready to fit the hardware to the doors. So I just wanted to show you where the sort of back beading on the shop door had overlapped, and I just wanted to show you that the glue has completely dried along there. Let me zoom in a little bit. So although you can see a little bit of the beading overhanging there, you can't see any of the glue. So I'm happy with that. And also the letterboxes are now completely dry, and there's a little bit of streakiness on there, and I know why. It's because I applied too heavy a second coat. I was just trying to get out of doing another coat, you know, leaving them to dry and having to do another coat. So it's just gone a little bit streaky, but I don't mind that. I think that looks quite nice, and I'll choose the nicest one of those, which I think is the top one, to go on the front of the door. But I want to start by attaching the handles to the shop door. And to do that, I'm going to be using my Gorilla Wood glue. And I've probably mentioned this before, but it works really well when you're attaching metal miniatures to wood. I think because one part is wood, it still grips really nicely. And you would have laughed at me if you'd have seen me in my craft room this morning. I was just trying to work out how high the handle should be, so I was sort of walking around and gripping as if I was opening a shop door, and then measuring where I was sort of gripping. And you know, you can do things like that when you're at home on your own. So it's actually about four feet, so that will be about 4 inches high. So I'm just placing the sort of handle part where you would actually grip at 4 inches high, and that looks quite nice there as well, doesn't it? And I really love these handles. When I first saw them, I hadn't even thought about doing the shop, and I thought I must do a shop so I can use those handles. They look really good on a sort of old-fashioned pub as well and things like that. And I've got a spare cocktail stick there for removing any excess. Just line that up there. So I'll just get it at the right height, and then I'm just looking now from the front to make sure that it's straight. I want it right in the middle as well, and give it a good firm press down. There's something about fitting hardware, I think. It just sort of adds that next layer of realism. I love attaching all the sort of little finishing touches. And I said yesterday about having the little open and close sign on there, which I'm looking forward to making. We'll try and make a little sort of rubber sticker thing, you know, that they hang through. See if I've got anything in my bits box that we could make that with. But I might also have some little, you know, advertisement posters, either of things that are for sale in the shop, or maybe we could advertise other things going on in the town. We could have some fun with that. It's all little details like that that really add to a piece. I always like to make things as interesting as possible for people that are looking at it. So that feels nice and solid in place now, but I'm just going to hold on to it and get rid of that excess glue. And then to do the one on the other side, I'm actually just going to put a bit of glue on and then measure it with that first one. Okay, so I'll leave that to dry off and we'll move on to the street door. So I just want to start by measuring the centre of this central panel finding the centre, and I'll attach the doorknob first. What's that, 48, so 24. And then find the centre across that way. That's 7.5. Just under 4. So the little stem on the back of there is just over 1.5 millimetres. So I'm going to put the 1.6 millimetre drill bit in. And I don't want to go all the way down with this because I don't want the hole coming through on the other side. Let's just try that in there. Yep. And it's a nice fit, but I'm going to put a little tiny bit of glue in the hole, just really to make it secure. Firm press, make sure that the little sort of plate bit around the back is flush with the door or sitting flat against it. Glad I went for that smaller doorknob. And that other one was a bit too large. And then I want to put my door knocker up there. I'm not going to measure, I'm just going to judge this by eye. Just want it in the centre where the sort of panels meet. And then, which was my nicest? It was that one actually. And again, I'm going to sort of do this by eye. Just get it in the middle of that thicker panel. So I measure from 23.5, 23.25. Give that a good press as well. And then fit that on the back, and I'm just realising I should have done that one first. Never mind, I won't press too hard. It's so easy to do things in the wrong order, just because you're sort of rushing to do things or excited about doing something. You don't think it through. It's not a major issue in this case. But then I could have laid the door down flat to attach the front one still. So I should have done it that way around. Well, that was a good guess. And then give that a press as well. I really can't wait to get these doors fitted. Fitting sort of main doors is a job I'm actually dreading a little bit, because I know it's not going to be easy to get those pins through. So sort of half of it is just to get it out of the way, but the other half is because I know they're going to look really nice once they're in place. And let's get them fitted. So I've pushed a pin into the bottom of the shop door, and I've just trimmed that off to about 6 millimetres or 1/4 of an inch long. And I'm just going to use another dressmaking pin now, just to clear out the holes actually in the door surround. The bottom one is probably going to be fairly easy to get in, but it's this top one that I think I'm going to struggle with. Just try and push that in there. Not very hopeful if I can't even get the pin in. So let me do it with the pliers, got a little bit more of a solid grip. There. Oh. Okay, so that hole's clear. Okay, so I'm going to trim the top from that pin. Actually, let me try it. Let me put it into the top of the door first, just to see how much I need to trim. Again, I'll try and leave about 6mm coming out of there. So remove that again, just check that it's lined up. So I'm now actually going to slot the bottom pin into place. Get the door into position. Push that forward a little bit. In fact, I think it might be easier if I actually stand this up and work downwards rather than coming at it at an angle. So let me just move the camera. Okay, so let's now try and get this pin in and into the door. Oh, I tried to put my fingers then through the acetate. So I'm just sort of trying to find that hole in the top of the door by just sort of gently moving it around. I don't think that's actually going in. So the pin finally went in, and I actually stopped recording just because it was taking quite a while. I haven't pushed it all the way in yet, and that's important because you want to test the door first, that it's opening and closing properly before you actually push it all the way in, as you'll never get it out again. I'm quite happy with that. Still got that little bit of stiffness up in that top right corner. Actually, I shouldn't push it forward. But yeah, opens wide into the shop, which is what we want, so that we can do some nice sort of display photographs with the door open. Love peeping through doors once there's stuff inside. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let me show you it sort of directly from the front as well. Take you down in the elevator. Looks good, doesn't it? I'm really pleased with that. I'll just have to remember when I'm opening it just to push it open in that top corner. But I don't want to have to take it out again now and make any more adjustments. So I'm now going to pop that pin down. And that's the first door fitted. Not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Just did take a little while to get that pin to go in. So you just have to keep manoeuvring the door. We know it's in the right place because that's where we measured it. So just be really patient, persevere with it, and it will eventually go in. And I think that looks really nice. So let's move on to the street door. Okay, so I've done the same thing again with the street door. Put a pin in the top and bottom and then just trimmed that off to about 6mm, a quarter of an inch. And then I'm just going to use a pin to make sure that those holes actually in the door are clear. That top one is actually going to be quite difficult to get in because I haven't got a lot of room up there, so I can't even use a full pin to try it out, so let me use that one. Yep, so that's fine as well. I'll put that to one side, put the bottom in first. Getting the door lined up. And then get that top pin back in. I was wondering where to go in from the front. I'm looking because it looks as though the hole on the door is a little bit further back. Have I got it in the right place? I think so. Come around like that. If this takes a while, I might just cut off again. What are the odds? That's gone straight in. Again, haven't pushed it all the way in. Oh, that was so lucky. Now that feels tight as I'm opening it, and sometimes you have to be really careful because sometimes you can sort of try it and you hear a bit of a squeak and one of the pins may actually crack through the door, so just be really careful. And as it turns out, that's opening quite nicely. It opens all the way. I'm just thinking the door is sitting a hair's width forward from the actual surround. Let me see if I can show you that. Get back in the elevator. Do you see what I mean? See that little bit of natural wood showing through, so I might just have to put a little bit of paint along the top of the door, and I can do it along the side as well because I've actually got quite a bit of gap in there where I've sanded, so I can dot a bit of paint along there, just a really thin coat, and that will hide any sort of natural wood. But really pleased that that went in so easily like that. So I'm going to push that one in as well. Let's try it again. A little bit tight, but I'll just be really careful when I'm opening and closing that. So I just need to dot that paint round. That will probably be the next job, and then at the same time I can give the beading for the back of the windows another coat. Okay, so let's have a look at this front. Now we've got those in. Put it back into place. Thought it would be better to sort of see it in situ like that, and I think that looks really good. I'm really excited as well about fitting that little outdoor lantern. So once we've got all of our glazing and everything in, we'll get that done today as well. That's going to look really nice. So next job is to touch up that paint and give the beading another coat, and then we can get all the acetate in, get those front window panels on, and we're really getting somewhere. So it's 11 minutes past 11 now, so I'm going to go and make my cuppa and then I'll get the paint out. So that's the second coat of paint on the beading there, so that's now drying. And then I did that coat of paint around the edges of the shop door, and that's a really thin coat using an almost dry brush as well. And then I just used kitchen towel to wipe around the front edges of the door to make sure that none of that had got onto the front of the door there. So that's drying as well. So whilst that beading is drying, I've cut templates for the acetate for the rest of the smaller windows, and the larger windows will be quite easy because the acetate will be fitted to the front outside, so I can just sort of measure and cut those at the time. And what I want to do now is attach the lining paper to this side of the door and then get that painted. And again, I'm going to just be using my Gorilla wood glue. The little nozzle bit is getting a little bit bunged up because I'm getting near the end of this one, but I've got another one coming today. I just want to put that on and spread it out. So I want to work quite quickly now so that that doesn't start to dry. And I've actually got here a brush that I use for spreading glue, so I'm going to use that, which will be quicker than my small spreader. Be careful not to get anything on the lovely doors. A couple of little hairs there I just want to pick out. Very expensive brush, so it's shedding. And then I'm just going to put a bit of glue onto a piece of card and then just go around those windows using my glue spreader. I'll worry about removing the glue that I've got on the inside of the window frames once the paper's in place. Okay, let's go and get the paper. And despite having that under those books for so long, it's still a bit curly. Quite nice and tough, this paper. I can sort of pull it out of it. So just working that around with my fingers. And I'm going to go and get my hairdryer. Speed up the drying process a bit. And to get rid of any of those wrinkles. A little bit of overhang at the edges, but I can trim that off. So that didn't go on too badly. There's a couple of little wrinkles and some little lumps and things where the glue has been a little bit heavy in areas. And there was a little bit of a crease down here. And what I've actually done is just used an eraser to sort of rub it out. So because this paper is made of sort of like that blotting paper stuff, you can actually just rub it out like that, or rub on it like that, and it does come away like rubbings. So you won't get rid of it completely, but it removes any sort of ridges which I had along there. And then the paint will actually cover that over. So that was that. So I now want to give this a coat of paint, and then all of these raw edges around here will be hidden when I fit the window surround at the back. And I'll just be using a bit of strip wood for that, or even just some 1.5, which I'll cut to about 6mm, and we'll frame all those around just to tidy them up. We'll do the same around the doors and the larger windows as well. And then that will look really nice on the inside. Right, so let me go and find my big tin of paint. that's the first coat of paint on the door there, and that's gone rather bubbly, but it tends to, and then that should shrink back as it dries. So I'm going to leave that now overnight. I did go over onto the door frames in a couple of places, so I'll have to touch that up. But I quite like that colour, that sort of creamy beige colour. It's quite a nice neutral colour. And it's now 1 o'clock, so that's taken me nicely up to lunchtime. So I'll go and put this somewhere safe to dry. And then I think after lunch I'm going to have another look at that roof and get the brick paper on the sides and on the chimney there. So I've got the roof here, and I've just made a template for the apex part, and that will be covered in brick paper. Now I think I said before I was going to leave that black line around the sort of pointed bit there, but I'm not quite sure what my train of thought was there, because I don't think that would actually look quite right. So I'm covering the whole area, and this template fits nicely at the other end as well, which I know it should, but it is always best to check rather than just assuming that they're going to be exactly the same. And then I've also made a little template for the brick paper that will go around the chimney breast. So I've cut that like that, just like a triangle, and folded it around. And then I've done the same for the other side. And this will be the back. And the reason I know that is because the larger piece of wood has been used at the front, so then you've got the join along the back edge. So that's how I'll remember that this is the back. So I want to stick these together, but I'll do a cut down the centre of that back piece, and that will be where the join is. So I'm just going to make a little pencil mark actually at each side where I need to join them. Just go along, we sit it there like that, and I can just cut it out of one piece of brick paper. And then I can just cut that piece in half, and then join these on. And I think I'm gonna have to have a look again where they were, because yeah, that's right. So I'll stick these together and then I can cut the one piece. And this is a good chance as well to use up some of the smaller pieces of brick paper that you've got left. So I've used masking tape to attach that to the brick paper, and I'm attaching it along a straight edge along the bottom there. Then I'm just going to use my craft knife to cut. After all the paper I've been cutting today, the craft knife's going a little bit blunt. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just use my scissors rather than changing the blade just yet. I'm just lining that back in because I've got a little tiny bit sticking out at one end that I need to keep. And again, that's where that front panel has been positioned just slightly higher on one side than the other. So just on one side I've got that little bit sticking up there. That's the first piece. And there's not a very nice edge on that other edge, so I'll use a fresh piece for the other bit. Again, turn that round to get a nice straight edge along the bottom. Make a little pencil mark on those corners because they're actually cut off at a slight angle as well. I'm looking for my masking tape and it's just tucked between my knees. So they're ready now to glue into place. Put that over there. And now I want to have a go at that chimney template. So I'm just going to trim along the bricks there to get a nice straight edge. And because there's quite a few twists and turns, I'm actually just going to draw around this. And I used that masking tape there because I had a little bit of a gap along the bottom of the template, so I used the masking tape to just make the template a little bit bigger in that area. So I just want to try this chimney template first. So if I get it into position along the side, a little bit tight under there, and fold it round, crease that in. Taking a little bit of manipulating around that side there. That looks quite nice. Fold that in as well. I'm quite pleased with that. And it was a good thing to do that black around the bottom edge there, because where there is a sort of little bit of gap in, which I can get rid of because actually that can come down a bit from there, you can't see it as much as if it was just natural wood. So when you're applying sort of outside dark paper, always do a sort of dark undercoat, which will forgive any little gap in, any little gaps. Okay, so I'm going to get that piece stuck on first. And I said, like in episode 3, that I'd got the tile paper, but I didn't get enough. And I thought today, well, I really can't wait to get it on, so I'll just do the front. And then I had an awful thought that what if, because I've got an order on its way, I thought what if when that order arrives it's out of stock or discontinued or something. So it's always best to wait until you have got the amount that you need, rather than just doing sort of part of the job. I placed that order a few days ago, so hopefully that will be here any day now. Okay, so let's get some glue on here. So I actually put the glue onto the chimney stack this time. I just didn't want to risk putting my paper down in it on my worktop and tearing it again like I did last time. And this paper is really nice to use as well. It just goes on really nicely and you don't have to worry about wrinkles because it's quite a nice thick paper. So fold that round at the back there. And I'll just put a little bit of glue on that flap and I can stick that down as well. Because the paper's embossed, you really need to sort of work that into the, well, you know, the indentations. I really like that. I think as well when we get our chimney pots on, that's going to look really nice. Really sort of all coming together now. Okay, so the battery is flashing, so I'll go and change that and then I'll do those ends. I thought it would be easier to actually stand up and do these ends. And again, I'm going to put the glue directly on there just because I don't want to risk ripping the paper. Spreader here. Make sure you get it right along the edges. Another good thing about this paper as well, if you think it's in the slightly wrong place, you can just sort of slide it along on top of the glue, whereas a thinner paper, once it's sort of landed, it's there, isn't it? It's stuck. So that's that end done. I think I'll actually sit down to do the other end because I don't want to turn it over. Then I can just sort of lay it down on the desk like that and just do it from this end. That was that little bit that I was saying about that just curls over that front panel like that. Okay, so that's that end done as well, and I just can't wait to get that tile paper now, and I'll also be making a template for that just to fit round that chimney really, and then that'll be the roof almost done, and we'll get those chimney pots on. So that's the roof back in place with the paper on the side there, and I think when we've got these sides done as well, that's going to look really nice. The paint on the inside of the door has also dried back quite nicely. All of those bubbles shrunk back, so that's looking good now, and I don't think I'm going to bother with a second coat on there. I quite like how that looks. And this morning I've spent editing this video so far, and it's already at 1 hour and 15 minutes, so we're running out of time. So what I'd like to do for the rest of this episode is get the acetate in the windows, get these front window panels glued on, and then get that little outdoor lantern attached, and then I can close off this episode. Now, yet again, I haven't got as much done as I wanted to. I did want to do a plan for the ground floor, where I'll be positioning all the furniture and what have you, so I haven't got around to that, but what I think I might do is do that as a separate little video in between this episode and the next one, and just post that up on its own, and that will then save a little bit of time in the next episode. So I'm just using those paper templates I cut yesterday to cut my acetate. So that's the acetate cut, and I've cut it for the larger window openings as well. And then before I can fit the acetate, I need to fit those smaller pieces of beading around the top of the doors. And I also did a very light coat of paint just around the edges of the door where I'd sanded off the paint to get that to fit. So that's drying at the moment. And I just did that because you could just see a little bit of the natural wood coming out in front of the door there. That is actually dry now, so I can close that up. And that's now hidden, so that's good. So whilst that bit of beading is drying for the door windows, I'm going to start fitting the acetate into these top ones. And I've just got this bit of cloth here just to protect the sort of painted area from my glue. Press that down. And all of the backs of this beading will be hidden with that second lot of beading. And I think what I'll do is just put a piece of kitchen towel on there and put one of those little paint pots on, just to weigh it down. Like that, and then work my way along. So that's the glazing fitted in the top windows. See if I can get a bit of reflection on there so you can see that in there. And that has now dried into place. And I've just realised that I've cut the wrong beading for around the doors. So I'm going to use the two pieces that I've cut for the two door windows to make a 6mm piece to go across there, because this piece along the top of the door is 6mm, so I need a piece of 6mm along the top, and then I'll recut the strip for this door ready for the next episode and get that fitted. But I'll probably also need the side pieces that I cut for the shop door as well to make up the side pieces along here. So that's my next job, is to get those into place. Then I can fit that piece of acetate, and then I'll move on to these larger windows. So I've added the bead in there using those bits of 3mm strip, which has now created that lip around this back edge, so that I can now glue the acetate into place. Hope you can see that there with the light coming through. It makes it a little bit dark back here. So I've just measured it so that the acetate fits just around that inside edge there. Right, so I'm just going to put a piece of kitchen towel on there, and again weigh that down, and then move on to the other one. And there, like that. Find quite a big heavy book, a couple of books there, put them across like that, and then I'll move on to the other one. So that's both pieces of acetate now fixed into those bottom windows, and that's been drying for 15 minutes, and I weighed both of those down with books. So now I want to fit the frame, and I've done a dry fit, so I know that this is my left hand one, and I've put an L on there just so I don't put it in the wrong place. And I'm going to use my Gorilla wood glue again for this, because I have got quite a lot of wood left around the outside. Starting by pushing that piece right up against the top there. In fact, I'm just going to remove that and put a bit of glue along the top of the frame. That is actually touching just underneath the shop name plinth. Press, and then I need to make sure that the sides of the frame are flush with the actual side of the wall there. So I'm going to weigh this down as well, but where I've got that bit of sort of strip wood under there, I'm going to put some clamps on. Along there. Make sure that's pushed right up. So that's the bottom bit nicely secured, and then I'll weigh the top bit down. Although that is sticking rather nicely, it's all sort of fitted into place really nicely. Let me put a bit of kitchen towel on there again. That's always just to protect it, and to protect sort of any books that you use to weigh it down. Let's get those two again, they were nice and heavy. So I'll put them that way. I can hear lots of creaking. I'm not sure whether it's the door in the middle there. A bit worrying. In fact, I might put one across there as well, see if I've got something quite thin. You can always rely on Stephen King for a nice heavy book. Okay, that looks a little bit overkill, but this frame has at some point warped, and once I put it into place it's trying to sort of skew this way, so I've pushed it where it should be and then weighed it down to try and hold it there. So I'm just hoping that that will dry okay. It's straight along this edge now, so it should be. And I'm actually going to leave this to dry overnight now, and I've got the little lantern ready, so that the first thing I'll do in the morning is get that attached. I'll close up for the day, shut up shop for the day, and finish off tomorrow. So it's the next day now and everything's completely dry, and I'm super pleased with how that's looking. I've got a little bit of work to do around the beading at the top of this door. There's a little bit of a gap there which I hadn't noticed because I'd done an extra coat of paint and that had obviously covered that up, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of fill in there and then give this a coat of paint and then a coat of varnish so that it matches the door. The acetate's a little bit dusty on the inside and out. I have to see if I can find a 12th scale window cleaner. But yeah, really pleased with that, and it's sort of just how I always imagined it looking. I think once we get that tile paper on, it's really going to make a big difference as well. And I've put this wooden plinth back in place, so that sort of tucks underneath the front of the house there, but I don't actually think it's deep enough. I'd like a little bit more along this front area here, so we can have some little display tables, and I wanted to put those little planters outside as well, so I think I'm probably going to need a little bit more room. So I'll need to find another sheet of wood of this thickness, and just looking at it, I think it's probably about 4mm. So that will be another job, and then I want to create an effect on there to look like pavement. So the next thing to do is to fit the little lantern. So I'm going to pop the camera on the tripod and then we'll get that on. So the lantern comes with this little sticky pad here, which goes on the back there and then against the wall. It's actually quite chunky, it's probably about 2.5mm thick, so that's going to be noticeable. So what I'm going to do before I take the backing off is just use a permanent marker here just to colour in the foam around the edge. That will then match the back of the lantern and it's not going to stick out like a sore thumb. I'm just going to get a glove on before I go any further around, because I know what I'm like and I'll end up getting it on my fingers. Put one of these Nitrile gloves on. Okay, so let's take the backing off. Stick that to the back of the lantern. Okay, so the little pad doesn't actually fit exactly, so I'm going to have to do a little bit more marking around the edge. Just around there like that. I have got it on my fingers now. And that's actually the other side of the paper coming off there, so that's okay. Right. And for positioning, I sort of had to play around with this last night, and I want it so that the top of the lantern is level with this part of the door, and I just thought that looked quite nice. And as I said earlier, I've decided to have it this side just because it's too shut in over there. It looks too sort of squashed in. So we'll have it there. I'm trying to make sure it's straight before I press it down. So lining it up with the lines on the brick there. That's pretty much in the centre as well. I keep trying to put my hands through the windows to get hold of it. Give that a press down. Let me have a look at that from the side. Yep, you can't see that big sort of ugly sticker now. So that's a good little tip if you get ones with those like really thick stickers on. Okay, let's get into a better position. Turn it on. Really like that. I think that really sort of finishes off the front. Okay, so that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed working on the shop over the last week or so, and I'm really pleased with how it's looking. I can't wait to get back to it for the next episode, so I'll see you then. Take care. Bye.